Hello, everyone. It is Wednesday, December the 7th, and this is Blog Talk Radio. My name is Cliff Faber, and that was Smash Your Cymbals by Cheap Sex. So today we hope we have a fun and informative show for you. We have a few guests on the line as well. We have Matt Berkowitz, who will do a talk called Market Terminology Decoded. Say hi, Matt.
Hey, everybody. Good to be here again.
We have Aaron Moritz, who is here speaking about individualism.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me on, Cliff.
And we have Jason Lloyd from France, who is responsible for international relations for the French chapter and coordinates a region in French, which I can't pronounce, so he will. And he has been traveling through Europe and right across Canada and has stayed with many Zeitgeist chapters and visited with many Zeitgeist groups, and he will give us some insight to his journeys.
Well, thank you for having me on the show.
And what is that region in France?
Oh, it's Pays de la Loire. It's in the northwest of France.
All right, excellent. Okay, to start things off, what I would like to talk about is the types of meetings or events that an active chapter should hold. There is two major types of meetings. The closed-door, invite-only meeting. Z-Day, for instance, would be such a closed-door invite-type meeting, or a town hall would typically be this type of meeting. And any time you have a meeting that is held in a hall or any similar location, such as a restaurant or a coffee shop or that type of place, where attendance is by invite or by an invite situation. The other type of meeting is an open public type meeting where you are simply located in an open space and you are drawing from the general public crowds that are flowing around you throughout the course of your meeting or gathering. Now, at this point in the global chapter growth of the movement, we should be acting on a 90 to 10% ratio of closed invite-style meetings versus open public-style meetings or events, meaning that 90% of your events should be open public-style and 10% should be closed-door invite-style events. The reason for this ratio is because we as chapters are in a massive awareness stage. Our focus should be on really trying to get out this information constantly to new people and spending less amount of time with people who are already in the movement or aware of the information. Although both style meetings or events are important, and both play an extremely needed role to really create those building blocks of a growing movement, our focus needs to be at this point on spreading the awareness or in the awareness stage. Many chapters have this ratio wrong and are acting in something more like a 90 to 10 ratio of 90% closed or invite meetings and 10% open public meetings, and some are only doing 100% closed or invite meetings and no public meetings. So I want to go through these two types of meetings. First, a closed meeting. Again, a closed invite meeting is any type of meeting where you need to send out an invite in order for people to show up. Z-Day, for instance, is this type of meeting. So would be a town hall. But most meetings that chapters are holding are in fact closed invite meetings. So as a new chapter, you are looking to build your membership, and then you, of course, want to be an active chapter, so you get a hall or a room or set up in a coffee shop or somewhere like that, and you put out an invite to your members and hold a meeting. Now let's look at this realistically. First off, you will only have so many members signed on to your chapter, and only a few of these will ever come out to your meetings when invited. Second, once you have held a meeting and provided great information, then what will you do with your next meeting? If you then schedule a second meeting or event a month later and people come out to hear pretty much the same stuff, they will probably pass on the third event or meeting the following month. And that is assuming that you are only holding one large meeting a month, such as a town hall, for instance. The information will become redundant and repetitive, and the same questions will be projected, and you will inevitably see a reduction in your attendance that will work negatively in the appearance of your chapter's growth. And many chapters get discouraged and stop holding these closed invite meetings anyway, as it becomes apparent that no one is showing up. And that is if you only do one meeting a month, and hopefully you as an active chapter are planning for a hell of a lot more than just one meeting a month. But not only are these closed invite type style events or meetings difficult to maintain, even at once a month. But imagine trying closed invite meetings weekly. It just won't happen. People will just not show up after a few weeks, and your events will fizzle out, and your chapter will become dormant before you even reach the 6-month mark. People need action and progress to see stuff happening. So the biggest negative, and there is a positive, but I will go into that shortly, but the biggest negative to closed invite type meetings is that you are almost always trying to draw attendance to these meetings from within your membership, your sign-ups to your chapter. Now, I don't want to go into a lot of detail here about memberships and sign-ups, but to say that people who sign up to your chapter and your website or your Facebook chapter page are showing support and agreement for the movement, and you can bet that they are out there talking to their friends and the current world and the things that are going on with the economy and the political landscape. They are well aware of it, and they are referencing Zeitgeist at every opportunity and telling their friends about Zeitgeist and giving them links and DVD and so on. Yes, the signups to your chapter are indeed out there doing stuff, but you send out an invite to a closed meeting and they won't show up. They might come out once and maybe twice, but not every time. They have lives and are busy, and it is not a reflection of a lack of public acceptance or public awareness when people don't show up to your closed invite chapter meeting. It is simply a lack of knowledge in effective meetings on the chapter's part. You can't start a chapter and expect to grow by holding closed invite meetings. 1, you have to invite people, and your invite pool from which you draw from is typically your sign-ups to your website. 2, these members are the choir. You are simply preaching to the choir. They are already signed up. 3, meetings will continually diminish with attendance, as your pool of invitees will eventually stop coming out. Yet this seems to be the meeting of choice for most. So the next meeting is the public open meeting. This is the meeting or the event where you, as a chapter, go directly out to the public and set up for a day and engage the public that is in the area where you are set up. Any busy location works perfect. This should be 90% of what all chapters should be doing right now. The Occupy event was an open public event. They simply picked a location with their core team, such as a park or busy downtown central location, and went out and set up. People ask me why Occupy was so effective in such a short time, and it is simply that they did not hold closed invite meetings. They would never have been successful if they took that road or that style of meeting. They held their meetings in a public area, and they put themselves right dead center in the front of the public's view. They were impossible to miss. This is why they were so visibly successful. This type of meeting or event takes very little work to set up and can be done with just 2 or 3 people. And 2 or 3 people is all you need. The attendance is built right into this scenario simply by setting up in the center of the crowds that are already there. No invite needs to go out, and no trying to drag your members out to yet another meeting. What makes these events so successful is that when you set up, you have an immediate draw built in. With big signs set up, you will have people noticing you. The general public will never notice you if you're in a closed invite type meeting. Many people who would not otherwise have even heard of you will now walk by and come up to your booth or your setup and will engage you and find out what you're all about. And don't underestimate the depth of conversations that will happen right on the street. We have had closed meetings with Q&As, and another negative to closed meetings is sometimes the time frame. You're limited in the amount of time that you might have a room for. If, for instance, you have to be out of the room at a certain time, and so you have to cut it short. Well, on the street, it's like a day-long Q&A. We will have a person just walk up to us and ask us what we're all about, and 4 hours later, they are still in deep conversation with a member or two from our group. And then they will leave with a couple DVDs, and the feeling is just amazing. The biggest plus to holding public events, just like the Occupy events, is that they cost nothing. The crowds or attendance are built right in, and every single time it is different people, a whole new crowd every time. In fact, we go out every single Saturday and set up just like the Occupy movement. And if we had the ability to go out more, we would. We could go out there daily, and it would be amazing. Never boring, never redundant, and never any loss of attendance. So once a week at a minimum, but daily if we could. It is just so much fun to talk to new people and engage a constant stream of new conversations that you just won't get from a closed invite meeting or event. This is what Occupy was. That was simply it. At Occupy, I saw speakers, Q&As, music, a general stream of awareness through the many signs and flyers that were being passed around. And that was on a daily basis. Occupy would never have been such a success if they rented halls and operated from a closed invite-style event. They simply threw themselves in the middle of the public and said, "Look at us." And what do you get from that? Momentum. Imagine the momentum if every chapter globally once a week was occupying a public community space and engaging the crowds that walked by or stopped by. This is what the world needs to see, a movement with a message that is out every single week engaging the public, and in every town and every city spreading a message of solutions. Don't hide behind closed doors. You will lose. Don't set yourself up to have to invite people to your event and be disappointed. And even if you do have a good turnout one week, can you maintain that week after week? It is inevitable that you will eventually not be able to maintain it. The numbers just won't be there. And lots more work needs to go into a closed invite-style event where you need a huge setup and microphones and so on. On the street, a simple setup can be used over and over again. Very turnkey. We like to call our street event our town hall street event because that's exactly what we are doing, holding a town hall. Conversations happen throughout the day on every topic. Many people will walk up to us after reading a signboard and have a question about what they read, or many just want to tell us that they really support what we're doing but never even heard of Zeitgeist or the Zeitgeist Movement. This was their first introduction, just seeing us on the street. This doesn't happen at closed-door invite meetings. You are simply inviting members, and the public does not know about you and will never find out about you in that way. Just like Occupy, take your activism to the street. Set up and let your community find out about you. Let the public learn about you. Get in their face. At a minimum, this can easily be done weekly with 2 to 5 people maximum setting up. So there's no excuse. It's not like you need to have a whole pile of people coming out to help set up. Also, this lets your members, the members who are on your site, who are part of your chapter, it lets your members know that you are actually doing something. It lets them know that you are an active chapter. Each week we send out a message letting members know that we will be out at the gallery, our setup location. This is where Occupy Vancouver set up. So we basically just kept doing what we were already doing anyway throughout the whole Occupy event. But we send out a message on our website and Facebook and let them know that we'll be out there on Saturday. Now, this is not to invite them, but more to inform them of this activity, this ongoing activity. Of course, members are welcome to join us, and every time a few different people do show up and check it out. But the real reason for this message is to notify them of this event so that they hear this over and over again. So the members are not required to be our success, but simply to participate in our success by knowing that we, their chapter, are actually out there doing something productive. So this is why Occupy was so successful. They took this model and they took it global. But it had its problems. The tents were an issue. They had no sense of purpose or solutions. This is where we are different. We have a message. We can occupy the streets, and globally, we have a huge message. We can do this the right way. Every week, we get people from all over the world that stop by, and they say they love what we are doing and agree with the message, and we ask them where they are from, and usually they have heard of Zeitgeist, but don't know if a chapter exists in their city. But we know it does. We have a map at our table that shows the chapters, and we point to it and tell them there is a chapter in their city, and go hook up with them. So could you imagine if every week this was happening globally? So 90% get out there, get visible in your community, and 10% closed invite events to engage your members. We find that closed invite meetings work very well in very limited situations. Z-Day, for instance, is a great invite-style meeting. The thing to take note is that if you don't harass your members to try to come out often or monthly, then when you do hold a closed invite meeting, it will be met with great success. Your Z-Day will be huge. But if this is your only meeting, then something is seriously wrong. We like to hold a meeting to entertain our members and engage our members about quarterly. 4 times a year is more than enough. And we usually draw pretty good for each closed invite meeting because there is only 4. So members are inclined to come out to 1 or 2 of these a year than to be asked to come out monthly. So we have Z-Day, and we have about 3 lectures with Q&As that we hold each year. Other than that, it is only open public events that are mostly our own Occupy events where we occupy the gallery, and as well we participate in community fairs and events such as Earth Day and Car Free and so on. But they don't compare to our own events where we just set up at the gallery and just a full day, 6, 7, 8 hours of just a constant flow of people coming by. It's the constant weekly event that drives the message home. On a large global scale, this would get noticed. In fact, on a small local scale, we have had almost every local news outlet interview us at one point or another, and they know we are out on the street every week. They've brought it up. They would never know about us behind closed doors in a hall or some room. And we don't even go to them. We just exist and set up and be right there week after week. A closed event is only good to occasionally entertain your members and give them a bit of chapter involvement. Make them feel a connection with the chapter. But the members also see your activity on the street and will really respect your commitment to the cause. And that also creates a connection with your chapter members, regardless of their involvement. The other event that we do is the Zeitgeist Festival. We held that at the Gallery Park. And on the other side of the gallery, where a lot of huge festivals happen, and this was an open event. We had about 3,000 people come through for the day. Yes, a few hundred members came out, but the park would have looked completely empty if it was just members. By setting up and making it a free community event, we had many people walk away enjoying a great Zeitgeist Festival day. They had never even heard about Zeitgeist, and now they were attending an event. And these are just people walking by for the most part. They're out shopping. They can hear the music. They can see there's a crowd gathered over there. And they come out and they spend the day. They listen to some bands, walk around, check out some of the booths, and absolutely successful. If we would have set up an event behind closed doors and invited some bands and some people, well, what are we doing that for? They're already signed up members. So 90-10, that's the ratio. Shoot for 90% open public engagement. Open public meetings where you can engage the community in conversations, get material into their hands, and 10% closed invite meetings to engage the already signed up members. If you do the 90% effectively, you will see your attendance at the 10% meetings grow as well. Okay, so now I'd like to pass the microphone over to Matt and Aaron.
Hi, everybody. The topics that both Aaron and I are going to be discussing revolve around market mythology. I also had these ideas published on the Zeitgeist Movement's blog on December 2nd for an article called Market Terminology Decoded. Same thing I've titled this talk. There are common terms trumpeted by politicians, monetary economists, and just the general defenders of the status quo that we've all heard. But I'm sure many of us, especially those of us in the Zeitgeist movement, we cringe at their use. It can be blatantly recognized that these terms do not really mean what they seem to on the surface. I wouldn't necessarily charge those who use such terminology as being deceptive or intentionally misleading, though that is often the case for politicians. Rather, the implications of these terms are such that the actual meanings go under the radar of the general public. It's as John McMurtry explains, a governing syntax that is unnoticeable to those who are victim to it. So let me get into defining and explaining these terms that are generally propagated in free market doctrine. I'll start with likely the most ubiquitous term in free market doctrine, freedom. The free market is said to somehow give an unparalleled amount of freedom compared to any other conceived system. But what freedom really translates to, in context, is the unabated ability to use the marketplace to turn private money into more private money. So you're really only as free as your purchasing power will allow. Of course, this definition of freedom ultimately comprises the basis of our infinite growth paradigm, where exponentially more resources are consistently needed to meet this never-ending growth requirement. So paradoxically, market freedom is inherently unsustainable. And speaking of backward definitions, that brings me to the second term that is so pervasively used in the market: efficiency. From a monetary economics point of view, this almost always means cost efficiency, the need for corporations, or any individual really, to minimize costs in order to maximize profit. This, of course, invariably leads to reducing the quality of all products, often with planned obsolescence, for the purpose of profit maximization, generating tremendous waste. So this cost efficiency is inverse to resource efficiency or technical efficiency, which, if to be evaluated without the barrier of cost, would be the aim of minimizing the usage of resources, building the highest quality, longest lasting products possible with the ultimate goal of peak sustainability. So again, paradoxically, market efficiency is inherently unsustainable. The next term I want to mention is heralded as free market blasphemy by those who ardently uphold its doctrine, that being market intervention, a tendency that is said to reduce the efficiency of the marketplace and limit the amount of freedom that can be enjoyed. Well, if we use the real interpretations of freedom and efficiency that I have explained, then this is essentially true. Market intervention is any force, usually imposed by government, though its influence can, funnily enough, originate from the private sector. So it's any force that disrupts or inhibits the ability to turn private money into more private money. And this takes me into another utterly convoluted concept in market doctrine, the concept of value, which should really be understood as money value. Similar to the market definition of efficiency, meaning cost efficiency, the adherence to money value detaches perspective from the laws of nature. The market's concept of value is a presupposed concept that derives a socially contrived monetary value where a good or service is theoretically based on its real or perceived scarcity, the money value of its component parts, and the labor utilized to create it, along with the largely publicly unnoticed distortion of social values, where people are conditioned to perceive and uphold this money value. This definition of value is unrelated to the life sequence of value as coined by John McMurtry, which recognizes value or significance only from that which directly relates to supporting improved health and life of people in the environment, which can be objectively defined through the methods of science. I'll pause here for a second to simply reflect on how these illusions I've mentioned thus far have distorted human perception. The discrepancy between life support value and money-defined value should be obvious even to those who support the market structure. I'll comment more on this afterward. Another term central to market doctrine that is often used to justify the inequities inherent in the system is voluntarism, which supposedly exists in the market system. This refers to the idea that participation in the marketplace is voluntary, or of individuals' free choices, and that it does not impose any external pressure or manipulate one's behavior and values to conform with what is necessary to obtain money value in order to survive. Let's ignore for a second the scientific cause and effect reality that debunks free will or free choice, meaning voluntarism in the sense of human behavior. The concept of voluntarism assumes that employment and the exchange of goods and services are free from coercion. This is only with respect to there being an opportunity being presented to people. However, the poor generally remain poor, and the rich generally remain rich, don't they? Studies repeatedly affirm this structural classism, or built-in inequality, inherent in the mechanics of the market, seriously challenging this notion that there is any voluntarism in the structure. And this, coupled with the financial coercion, where we must all submit to market activities simply to obtain money value to give us access to the necessities of life, this further shatters this pervasive myth. Next, the almighty, omnipotent, invisible hand. I introduce it like that because it essentially is like asserting that some divine power, some God, is watching over society to magically make everything work out for the betterment of humankind or society at large. This term, the invisible hand, was of course first coined by Adam Smith in his book The Wealth of Nations, in an attempt to describe this assumed self-regulating nature of the marketplace, this unsightly and immaterial force that guides the transactions of the marketplace to manifest into social betterment. No empirical explanation is ever given for how this occurs. It's just assumed market doctrine. And this invisible hand now works on a global scale within what is often called globalization. The now global context and global marketplace in which transactions occur solely for the purpose of maximizing private money sequences, cataclysmically multiplying the inefficiency of the marketplace with respect to resource management for the goal of peak sustainability on the planet. I like how Peter describes one aspect of this phenomenon in Zeitgeist Addendum with respect to the manipulation of countries by international bodies like the World Bank or the IMF, along with the corporate constituents it supports. They do this through the use of debt, bribery, and political overthrow on a global scale to primarily accumulate scarce resources that the United States requires for economic dominance. Moving on, we have the famed economic growth concept, preached as a gloriously beneficial thing for social progress and prosperity. A closer look reveals this to be exactly the opposite. Economic growth is simply the constant need for more and more consumption at exponentially accelerating rates in order to maintain the market system, regardless of the consequential social and environmental costs. That's it. Of course, the latter part of this definition is conveniently excluded from most educational curriculums and concealed from public exposure. Within this economic growth doctrine is said that what fuels it are the consumers. Market doctrine assumes the consumer to be one of three role players in the marketplace, along with the employer and the employee. Both are also consumers. Assuming this role to have considerable power with regard to influencing the activities in the marketplace, and therefore driving so-called economic growth. In reality, the consumer is nothing but a business or monetary unit to be exploited for the purpose of private money maximization. Influence can only be exerted proportional to an economic unit's monetary value. An economic unit can be an individual, corporation, or government, basically anyone or anything that owns or can generate money value. And this brings me back to the concept of value, this time relating it to distinguishing between a need and a want. Since both needs and wants are obtained in this market system with money value, how can there be a distinction? There can't be. Need isn't even in the free market lexicon. It's implicitly dissolved into the definition of want, which can only be satisfied if the consumer has accumulated enough money value. And since the prime motivating force in the market is money value maximization, there can be no such concept as too much or excessive under this governing paradigm. In an objective, scientific sense, the difference between a need and a want could be understood as follows. Anything without life capacity is of reduced value, meaning it's a want. So I could continue along this line for quite some time, going through hundreds and hundreds of market terms, but I'll pause there, and I'll pass the mic off to Aaron, who's going to be talking about the myth of individualism and other related concepts within the free market. Here you go, Aaron.
Thanks, Matt. I'll start out by saying that the battling notions of collectivism versus individualism are, in essence, a false dichotomy. And to quote something a friend of mine said to me on Facebook, it's obvious that we are, in fact, a collective of individuals. The point of this talk is not to show that individualist philosophy does not work, per se. That has been covered very well by many others. What I am arguing is that a pure individualist philosophy cannot even exist in reality, even by those who claim to practice it. It is, in essence, a myth. Now, collectivism also has its own associated myths, and I'll touch on that closer to the end. But one of the fundamental stumbling points of our current social arrangement is a dogmatic myth of individualism that is being popularized by proponents of the market system. The first and most obvious fatal flaw in individualist philosophy is in its most basic premise, which is self-contradicting, that society as a whole will operate at its peak potential when each individual acts solely on the basis of their own individual needs, disregarding the needs of the whole. This virtue of selfishness, as put forth by novelist and market popularizer Ayn Rand, portrays self-interest as something to be pursued without regard to the effect on anyone or anything else, unless, of course, helping others directly benefits yourself, usually in a monetary sense, and only if people act in this virtuous, selfish way can we truly create the best society for every individual. The contradiction becomes evident as we note that we are still using the best society for every individual, or the collective good, as the measuring stick. It is still the often unstated but nevertheless implied goal. Market theorists don't push for the adoption of their theories based on the idea that some people will be better off and others won't. They are still strategizing on behalf of the collective and are therefore not only looking out for their own self-interest. The ideology collapses onto itself because it's nearly impossible to even conceive of what it means to serve our own self-interest without serving the interest of others. Our survival is directly dependent on one another, not to mention that our brains are wired specifically in ways that cause us to be empathetic, to experience the emotional highs and lows of others. Healthy human beings care about each other. We can't help it. And contrary to what individualist philosophy rests upon, we can never have a society that meets people's needs, which is based on purely selfish behavior, because people only tend to act in a purely selfish way when their needs aren't being met. The second fatal flaw of individualist philosophy is that it is completely and objectively impossible to separate our own needs from the needs of the people around us. Nobody lives in a bubble, and nobody is an island unto themselves. We are intimately affected by the unmet needs of others, and not just simply because we feel empathy for others. Humans are subject to social pressures that directly affect our biology, causing illness, addictions, and various other behavioral issues. On a more direct level, it is also true that humans, when deprived of their basic needs, tend to initiate force against each other if it seems that this will aid in meeting those needs, and as such, we cannot be truly secure in any situation where some of our needs may be getting met at the expense of the needs of others. Social institutions such as the military or police force, which laughably claim to exist in the name of national and personal security, are truly nothing more than expressions of this collective insecurity which must exist at the root of any society that believes it can take care of some of its members while depriving others. Literally, the only way we can create a system where the individual is truly free to flourish and feel secure in their own life, the only way to allow each individual to reach his or her own peak potential is to take care of all individuals, the collective of individuals. Thus, we need to cooperate. We need to learn what our own needs and the needs of others truly are in clear terms, effectively communicated, and then scientifically and cooperatively design methods by which we can meet the needs of every individual without sacrificing the needs of any other. The most damaging and sustaining myth regarding collectivism is the fear that a certain group of leaders must, by default, be in control, making decisions based upon their own opinionated whims about what is best for the collective, enforcing deprivation under the guise of some immeasurable or ill-defined social good. This is part of the reason why there has been such a strong support for strict individualist philosophies. Writers such as Ayn Rand have popularized such parodies of collectivism, in which any promoter of the social good is often portrayed as a state-sponsored goon with a figurative gun in hand, perpetually coming to take away what the individual has earned. Of course, these types of actions are deplorable and are also about as far from being truly socially conscious or collectively responsible as we can get. The fact that brutal regimes attempted to hide their brutality behind a guise of collectivism does not mean that cooperating, helping, and taking care of each other is a bad thing. In fact, authoritarian leaders are perhaps some of the only people in history to successfully practice a truly individualist philosophy. They ruggedly pursued and achieved their own self-interest above all else. They allowed their own needs and the needs of a few select few that are of benefit to themselves to be met at the expense of the needs of society. A dictator is a true individualist. Today, given our current scientific and technological capabilities, we have the historical opportunity to create the first truly collectively beneficial society wherein the needs of each individual are not sacrificed for an undefined social good, but rather are met and exceeded, providing strength and resilience to the society, to the global community, and to each individual within it.
All right, thanks, Matt and Aaron. All right, up next, we're going to hear from Jason, and he has been traveling the world and has a lot of stuff that he would like to tell us about Zeitgeist chapters, the people that he's met along the way, and a little bit of insight to what some of the other chapters are doing. Here is Jason.
Okay, thank you, Cliff, for having me on the show tonight. And I would like to give a lot of thanks to all the chapters who gave me the opportunity to integrate the chapters for a while. So I'm basically here in Canada to travel. I've hitchhiked in Canada for the last 3 months. And I got the chance to meet a lot of chapters on the way. So I started in Ontario. I actually met Toronto, Hamilton, and chapters in Port Burwell. And I also met some chapters in Vernon and Vancouver, so in British Columbia. So this gave me a lot of insight on all the different communication methods that people use around Canada to engage the public. So first of all, in Toronto, they chose to actually talk and engage the public through astonishment methods. So they were actually touring around town with a banker, which was actually typing in a cage with a sign saying wage slave. So this worked out quite well, and they had a lot of responses through that. In Hamilton, they had a different communication method campaign. They were actually going through creating Zeitgeist associations in schools to engage the youth and getting people to try and think about it as a different topic in the school years. Then I went to Port Burwell. It was quite interesting. He was living in a 100% sustainable bus, and we're getting people to come and see that a different way of living is actually possible, and showing people that renewable energy could be used to live in a different way today. That was really interesting, and in Ontario they have a lot of people who are actually very into the Zeitgeist movies. In British Columbia, they also have different kinds of methods. First of all, in Vernon, they spread word through local associations and events. So they actually use associations that people already know and spread the word through them. In Vancouver, they have another different way of engaging the public. They actually set up booths every weekend in the main square of Vancouver, so next to the art gallery. And that is a very interesting method. I actually, after all these methods that I've seen, I think that one of the favorite methods that I found here was setting up the booths. It is actually an easy way to get it done. They engage the public in a great atmosphere, and material is actually easily transferred from chapter to chapter. So they engage a lot of people, from old to young people, from female to male, from people who are aware of a resource-based economy, who've actually seen the movies or are part of other movements, or we've actually heard about a resource-based economy through the Venus Project, but also happen to talk to people who are just interested in an alternate solution. All of this is a good example to reach a critical mass. So this could actually be a good method to reach critical mass and critical thinking, so that people could actually shift from the current system we have today to resource-based economy system. So seeing all these methods was very interesting. Like through all my hitchhiking days through Canada, I actually got to talk a lot to people while I was hitchhiking. and people had actually seen the movies, or heard the Venus Project, or heard about a resource-based economy. I think there's a great potential in Canada because people are sort of eco-conscious, socially conscious, and are very friendly and helpful towards the environment. So I'll take all these ideas back to France and try and have these communication methods actually applied in the French system. Obviously, we'll have to adapt them and try and set it to the cultural setup in France, and the level of awareness is not as good in France as in Canada. So, taking these methods, and given the economic crisis in Europe at the moment, I think it would be possible to get people to be more concerned about the actual situation and show that an alternate solution is possible, like, for example, a resource-based economy. The last point I would like to address is that with this experience, I really think that cooperation should be a great value which should be growing within the movement, especially given that we're an international movement today. And so I think this cooperation should come, first of all, out of internet, like people should work on different work teams. But also, I encourage any person who actually travels around the world to try and meet with the local chapters of the countries they actually travel to. It is a great experience, and we can really learn a lot from each other. So I have been doing this for the past 3 months, but people like Paulina and Jaziek have been doing it around Europe, for example, in summer 2011. And that was a great experience on their side that I've heard. So I'm sure people would enjoy to share information with the travelers, and the travelers could gain loads of information of the people who are actually taking them into their chapters. So I would just like to say once again thank you to all the Zeitgeist members of Canada. Keep up the good work, and best wishes for the future.
Thank you, Jason. That was great. What has been the biggest difference that you have noticed between the European Zeitgeist public reception, or more specific, I guess, the French reception to the movement or the movies, compared to what you have seen as you've been traveling across Canada?
Well, I think the main difference today is the level of awareness. I have seen that the Canadian public is actually much more aware of the problems of our system today, and French people tend not to get it as much, and it is actually quite hard to get ideas across. A lot of times we are labeled like Marxist or anarchist or stuff like that, and it's probably due to the fact that in France a lot of riots and protests are always going on, so people just think it's another protest like any other.
So I also had a question for you, Jason. You mentioned that setting up the booth and engaging the public through that medium you found to be the most effective method in getting out the word about the Zeitgeist movement. We, of course, agree with you here in Vancouver. We do this on a weekly basis, as you mentioned, set up at the Vancouver Art Gallery. And we think it has quite a lot more effect than, say, setting up a meeting in a closed room or in a closed, even a town hall style event where you're essentially preaching to the choir and the art gallery reaches new people. Just wondered if you could maybe expand on why you thought setting up the booth in this type of setting was the best way to go insofar as getting the word out about the movement.
Basically, I have kind of the same ideas. I've seen a lot of people actually setting booths all over the world, and I had, being in charge of international relations, I had quite a lot of responses saying that it was quite efficient. So we started doing that in France in our local chapters, and people are actually saying that it does work really well, and it is one of the best ways to engage the public, at least the French public, for the moment. Well, the thing is like a lot of people actually nowadays in France get annoyed with people coming up to them in the street and trying to sell them things. The thing of setting up a booth is that we're not going to people, they are coming to us. So that means they're actually interested and they want to have more information. So that's a good way of meeting with them, gaining contact, giving them as much information as possible. And I think this is for sure the best way to go.
Hi, I have a question. My name's Rachel. I'm from England, but now live in Vancouver and I'm part of the Zeitgeist Vancouver team. Having English as a first language has made it easy for me to get involved and converse with the locals regarding these topics, since it's basically the same culture. I know the linguistics team do what they can in terms of getting materials translated, etc. But I was just wondering how easy it is to raise awareness in a French-speaking country in a movement whose primary materials are in English.
Okay, thank you, Rachel, for this question. It's a very interesting question. It is harder in the French countries to actually spread awareness, just by the fact that after all the material is actually released in English, our linguistic team has a huge work to actually translate everything. So we actually manage to engage the public a bit later on with the newer material for the time it's being translated. Once the material is actually translated and adapted to French cultural settings, it goes the same way as it would go, I would suppose, in any other English-speaking countries. Another thing we have started doing, so it's easier for every chapter around the world, every French-speaking chapter around the world, is we were trying to organize ourselves as a sort of francophone chapter. The Zeitgeist Movement always advocates breaking down geographical barriers, cultural barriers, and language barriers. So what we've tried to do is getting work teams to actually go on a main website which is completely in French. And so any chapter who wants to start something new in a French-speaking country already has all the material there. They just have to print it out and they can set up booths in the streets like we do or like the Zeitgeist Vancouver chapter does. And it makes it very easy, and I think it's a good way to spread awareness.
All right, excellent, Jason. Thanks so much. And I just want to give a shout out to the Okanagan chapters. There are a couple of new chapters started up. They're just doing an amazing job, and great that you could visit with them. And of course, all the other chapters across Canada. And I also wanted to actually expand a little bit on the wage slave cage that you saw in Toronto there. This is an amazing thing and a great opportunity and a really fun way to create some activity with your chapter. Basically, this is like if you know the tourist type situations where they have cutouts of maybe famous people or something like that, and it's got where the head goes. They have it cut out, and you can stick your head through it. And of course, people like to take pictures of this, and then they get sent to all their friends and Facebook. Well, this is basically what it is, and we're actually working on our own wage slave cage here, and we're looking very forward to having it out on the street with us every time. And it's just a huge draw. And as people walk by it, of course, they want to sit in it. They want their friends to take pictures of them in this wage. I mean, everybody gets the joke. I mean, it's very obvious. No one's immune to the comedy factor in that. And of course, they take this picture of being in the wage slave cage, and then hopefully those pictures are plastered all over the internet and the Facebook. And what is great about this is, you've got this very visible way of getting the name out there in a really neat way, and having Zeitgeist written all over on it, it's just something that'll be part of people's images and photos, whether they're visiting from out of town or just people walking around. It's a really neat thing to do. And what I've done is actually, if you want to get more details on that, I have the website zmchapters.com. That's zmchapters.com. There is, and let me just have a look here, under chapter projects, you'll see some projects that are listed there. You'll see one link for the wage slave, and it's really cool. You'll see some images there, and that's some Toronto guys in action there. And very neat thing, easy to do. And if you follow that link, of course, it's got some easy setup stuff from Ryan there. And then right above that is the street action, and there's some very in-depth, detailed information on setting up some street action for your chapter as well. So anyway, that's right on that website, zmchapters.com. You can have a look at those. The wage slave is a really fun idea for the summer. I can see it being lineups of tourists wanting to have their picture taken in the wage slave. Just make sure to have Zeitgeist Movement written all over it, because those pictures are definitely going to be all over the internet. So thanks again, Jason, and for all your information. So recently, this is a little segment here that we like to call our movie review segment. Lately, I've been bombarded in my on my Facebook and emails with this movie that I just absolutely have to watch called Thrive. Apparently, it was going to be very eye-opening and provide a lot of really great information. And, I had to go to a screening and all kinds of great things. So I did finally sit down to watch the movie. And, that's about all I can say about it. What I'm going to do now is, here's Matt, and he's going to give a little input, and I think Aaron's also going to give a little input into what they thought of the movie. So here's Matt.
Well, thanks, Cliff. I guess I'll further expand on your review there. Crop circles, aliens, and free energy aside, there is some legitimate information in the film about banking. Although it's nothing that you can't find in other movies and put a lot more succinctly, like in Money as Debt or the first part of Zeitgeist Addendum. And then the film, it falls victim to the baseless New World Order Illuminati projections that the problems in society are somehow the cause of a ruling elite rather than the corrupt, cancerous social system that essentially destroys everything in its path. So they make a lot of claims at the beginning that there's simply just no evidence to support. And frankly, I don't even know why they focus on a lot of the issues they do. Why would you focus on free energy when you have all the renewable energies like geothermal, solar, wind, and so forth, when we actually know that we can do that and use these types of energy potentials right now? No need to talk about something that is a little bit ambiguous in terms of its the supporting evidence for it. And the crop circles and aliens, I don't even understand why they're talking about this stuff. If we want to figure out how to solve the problems in society, let's look at the social system that governs our behavior and the institutions that support it. So insofar as solutions, well, I guess I'll let you, Aaron, describe the solutions or lack thereof in the film.
The solution put forth in Thrive is actually we need more free trade. The film explicitly references Ludwig von Mises as the inspiration for the solutions presented. As Matt pointed out earlier, calls for more freedom within the market context usually refer to freedom to turn money into more money. And indeed, Austrian economics, which was heavily influenced and defined by the philosophy of Mises, promotes the least regulation on market forces, the smallest amount of market intervention possible. So I think many of the ideas presented in the beginning of the film were interesting, but the solutions presented are just more of the same, turning money into more money.
All right, thank you, Aaron and Matt, for helping out with that review there, and also for your talks earlier in the show. And thanks, Jason, for your information as well. It's great that you've had a very good trip so far across Canada, and hopefully it continues to go very well. We're very happy to have you out here right now, and it's been a lot of fun. And that's about it for us right now. I guess we've got big events coming up. We got Z-Day, of course, but lots of time before Z-Day. Tons of time to get out there and do just a shitload of really, really good activism and have a lot of fun with it. So that's it for us. We started with a great punk rock tune that I think's got a lot of smash your cymbals, pretty much self-explanatory. We're really driven, of course, by a lot of symbols in our society. And we're going to end with a great black metal tune here. So enjoy it. That's all for us. And we will see you or talk to you next time. Thanks.